In this real-side experience, I would find myself returning to my house. My parents were present, as was my sister Lindsay. The hour was drawing late. It was approximately 11 p.m. or so, I would say, and it was as though I had to be at work the next day or something, as I was very conscious of the time and the necessity for sleep accordingly. However, Lindsay would make mention of an event or other that was happening down the street, and the way she described it had me forming the impression it was a wedding or such, although at a very unusually late hour. Nevertheless, despite this, and that a job or something awaited me the next day, I would accompany Lindsay to this event. The scene switched, and although it was initially a location very local to the house, it seemed as though it was far further away. Certainly not a wedding either, though a large gathering of people were seated in the hall of a grand building. The vast majority of individuals I failed to recognize, though mingling among the unknowns were other members of my family, both currently alive in the physical, as in an uncle and aunt, and a few who were deceased and had transitioned from the physical, my grandfather and grandmother, who had been parents of my mother. There was an individual orchestrating affairs, almost providing a show and comedy routine of a kind, and as I seated myself, and was acknowledged by those I knew, the family members I mentioned, this speaker would single me out. He would attempt to humiliate me, drawing me into a sort of interview where my responses were met with flippant, sarcastic, and humorous remarks, designed to elicit reaction and mirth from the multitudes here. This proceeded for a few moments. I didn't allow myself to become emotionally reactive, and simply answered that which he asked of me. Then my grandmother, now deceased, came over to my side, and would point to one of the walls of the building, and there were a number of photographs dating back many years, and a number of the photos depicting various individuals were in black and white, and even older artist renderings of other characters, before photography became readily available. These photos and paintings were arranged neatly, and at the foot of the wall beneath where they hung was a kind of shrine or other, as though in honour of these people. My grandmother would proclaim how the bloodline that I had become a part of had its roots in ancient royalty, or wealth, or something along these lines, as I forget her exact words at that point. She did go on to say how, as a result of my lineage, it fell upon me to eliminate an individual, apparently someone who resided in my very street. If I were to do this, great wealth and status would be restored to the family consequently, as though it remained out of reach until this action was fulfilled. As far as I am aware, as far back as my particular current lifetime family bloodline goes, it was never one immersed in wealth of any kind. More workers and farmers, and this coming from the lips of my grandmother, who seemed privy to this information now that she had transitioned. Interestingly, I had a real side experience not so long ago, where I was shown, by what I took to be a guide, that I was possibly removed from a far wealthier family line and placed into the one I am now, for it was felt that being in such a position with a far wealthier family would be more detrimental than beneficial for my process of becoming more aware, and so the switch was made at some point when I had entered this lifetime. Was it an exchange, then, agreed with between the real awarenesses of two individuals, an agreement based on the most mutually beneficial outcome in regards to each of our respective awareness processes? Naturally, then, from the limited perspective of the personal self, this exchange would go unnoticed. Your personal awareness would simply occupy another created consciousness vehicle, and as far as it was concerned, this would be who it was. If we imagine the body of vehicles to be the culmination of all its experience, and its construction based on what was decided and agreed upon, then we are simply slipping unconscious into a pre-programmed vehicle and taking on all its routines, drives, compulsions, and attitudes, etc. It would be like moving from one car to another. You simply take on the vehicle that you assume possession of, and if unconscious and locked into the personal self, that's what you would be, regardless of what you were before. If you had had your awareness relocated to a new body vehicle, you may well have curious dreams that show you as being in a different life and situation, and these scenes would seem familiar, even though you knew you hadn't experienced them in your current lifetime, for this would be your real awareness revealing these scenes to you, because your real awareness oversees and knows all the body types, lifetimes, circumstances, and situations that its various created personal selves have been through, whereas the personal self can only know of its current lifetime as a mechanism is added in place that ensures, generally, no knowledge of previous lifetimes are available, except intuitive flashes, déjà vu, and hints through that which we are drawn to or find familiar, the illogical phobias we have, and also the insight we can glean from regressions to past lifetimes provided by those schooled in this practice of regression. But as we become more aware, as we connect and stand ever more so with our real awareness, which is what we are afforded these experiences as the guides decide to reveal them to us, and we put them together as best as we can recognize their demonstration, draw our conclusions, and become more aware consequently. The reason I was shown the experience that hinted at this exchange of created consciousness body vehicles as revealed by an individual I took to be a guide, would make sense then in the context of this current experience that would follow several weeks later, for it seems the guides knew that there may be some tenebrous link and connection with this previous body vehicle, that I may well experience a little crossing over of wires, so to speak, a blending of alternative created consciousnesses, and that I may draw unnecessary conclusions and assumptions. My personal self may have taken this notion on board, that my current family bloodline was descended from wealth as suggested, and may be based on a bloodline that nature may have been dubious, as many wealthy bloodlines tend to be. My personal self may have taken on notions of guilt, shame, or whatever other emotional ideas it may attach to the revelation revealed in this experience. And perhaps then my grandmother and the recognizable family members at this gathering were not the actual individuals, but wearing the faces of those family members I knew from this lifetime, a concealing overlayer, obscuring the actual individuals, and whoever my grandmother was in the lifetime I was removed from, if this evaluation is correct. Or maybe the dark forces were on hand yet again, never wanting to let a good opportunity go to waste, the masters of disguise and obfuscation, and maybe having read my Akashic files, as the Kalorm god would have access to these, as they are within his dominion, it's possible they set up the entire scene, a scene based on a created consciousness that I had vacated, with dark force agents assuming the roles of current family members to cause confusion and tapline me through my emotional reaction.